pour nous l'éternité, dans le bleu de toute l'immensité, dans le ciel.
Artistic expression is no excuse for a deeply offensive attack on Christianity. Whose idea was it to perform a drag queen parody of this image, Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, an iconic painting which represents the historic moment that Jesus Christ dined with his closest friends?
Hello and welcome back to Quiet Riot Sunday School. I'm Alex Andrew.
And I'm Naomi Smith, and this is a very special Sunday School. After Friday's opening ceremony triggered hard right Christian Twitter, we felt we owed it to you to do an extended edition of, you guessed it, Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Okay. Okay, what were your favorite... let's start with genre of take before we go into specifics, shall we?
Oh, God. I mean, I found it funny, obviously, reading the rebuttals to the angry mob. But genre, I'm going to go for religious right, the Christian fundamentalists. They've definitely been the most funny in terms of their shock and horror at what they had to witness on the TV. What about you?
I think mine were the looking back at other ceremonies with rose-tinted glasses takes. The
Greeks would never have done this.
I enjoyed that so much. Someone tweeted, let me just find it for you. Ollie tweeted, throwback, 2004 Athens Olympics opening ceremony paid homage to the history and culture of ancient Greek. No woke, no drag queens, no mocking Christianity. And he's got like a picture of the dodecathon, you know, the 12 Greek gods in sort of statue form. Yeah. And I was like, oh, mate, I hate to tell you, but having other gods and worshipping false idols are like numero uno and numero due on the no-no list.
But isn't that it with the religious right, you know, and the Christian religious right, that, you know, God and Jesus hates gay people and immigrants and liberals and elites and science and welfare and wokeness.
Yeah, it's all one swirl, isn't it?
Biden and Harris. Yeah. But on the other side of the ledger, oh, God and Jesus must love America and capitalism and the military and guns and aggressive masculinity and Donald Trump. You know, it is an incredibly crazy ledger you've got going on there. The double entry bookkeeping of the religious Christian right is remarkable.
And there's something else as well, right? Now, not to overlabor the point, but seeing as this is Sunday school, I cast my mind back to my own Sunday schools, and I seem to remember that sin is what you affirm your faith against, right? I seem to remember Jesus going into the desert, because effectively, without temptation, there is only easy virtue, which is not real. Overcoming temptation is the only way to sort of bring glory to God. So what you're seeing here is an opportunity to book passage for your eternal soul to the kingdom of heaven. So my scant understanding of the situation is that Christians are not meant to get angry at this stuff. They're meant to turn the other cheek. And there's so much rage at this, and it's like wrath is a deadly sin.
It is. I mean, and Trump himself was sickened by it all, and he says not just that the Olympic ceremony was mocking God and Christianity and Christians, but we were actually pushing a satanic agenda. Incredible. Well, in the 70s, America got obsessed with Satanism and the belief and the fear that it was a huge underground cult that was growing and growing and growing, and, you know, children were being taken and groomed to become satanic and being offered at satanic altars, the sacrifices and things like this. And when you look at the horror genre of that time and various true crime documentaries, from that era, it is incredible how fearful and gripped they were as a nation by it. And I wonder if we're sort of seeing that creeping back in 50 years later.
I think there's a really good documentary on Netflix, isn't it? I think it's called The Sons of Sam.
Yeah, it is.
It's a sort of journalism charting exactly that complete moral panic. It only lasted like 3 or 4 years, but it was serious shit. There were whole towns that went into paroxysms of burn the witch. It was medieval, this stuff.
Yeah.
But let's get back to the fun of it, I guess. I think, criticism of the ceremony is fair. It did go on a long time. And obviously the weather was really not much help to it. But it was a really ambitious project, I thought.
Very. And Tom Peck did a brilliant tweet about it. He said, "Why are there so many Brits moaning about this? It was raining. They sang Imagine. There was a small flotilla of boats. It was everything a Brit could hope for any kind of major event. It was very up."
I have to say, my frame of reference was instantly the Diamond Jubilee river
flotilla.
pattern.
Yeah.
It went on for bleeding hours, and it was in the middle of a rainstorm. Do you remember
I
that?
do.
The royals were sitting there with ponchos on the seats, and it went on and on and on.
And have you seen the moral outcry about one of the dancers who apparently was on display, shall we say? And there have been some photographs.
We're all adults here, love. You can
Popped a
say
bollock,
it. He
popped a bollock.
He popped a
Did
bollock.
he? Because actually, it could just be that he tore his tights, and it's just a different. It's his natural skin color compared to the rest of his leg that is in a tight.
Yeah. My sense is that if one of your balls was in that position...
It's not a cock, it's a ball.
No, but you would know about it. You just have to take my word for this one. If one of your balls was squeezed between your thigh and your very, very tight shorts, this is something you would notice. This is not something you could just sit there and smile through. That whole tableau actually seemed to be the one on which most people have absolutely dropped a nutshell.
I mean, Tim Montgomery's very upset.
So what are your favourite reactions?
Oh, well, I mean, loads of them. But, there's been people saying, I settled down with the children to watch what is meant to be family viewing. And now, I am going to have to boycott the entire games for fear of one of my children accidentally seeing, a ball. Which,
to be honest, is a risk when you're watching live sport.
Look, anyone can pop out at any time. It's so tiring to see this woke bullshit injected into everything. Had all the kids excited to watch the opening games, and it's hypersexual dancing from drag queens. I mean, seriously, what's the point? This has nothing to do with the Olympics. We've got Elon Musk himself getting involved, and there seems to be quite a few people defending the games having their content taken down from platforms, in particular TikTok. And I saw Zoe Gardner had a video taken down around it.
There's probably
an
automated AI way to detect the various symbols on the corners of the screen and sort of take them all down automatically, rather than something more coordinated than that. So this was one of my favorites. It's just a guy. He's only identified by a skull and crossbones. That's his entire name.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, this woke Olympic ceremony, FFS, and then goes, Macron, you will pay for your sins. Woke nonsense, probably the worst ever Olympics opening ceremony. #TV off. Okay? Now that's 7:17 p.m. 8:59 p.m. Yep, nothing says Olympics like weird trannies on a catwalk.
Oh, he hadn't turned it off, had he?
9:05 p.m. They've got a £600 lifer tranny on a DJ set. 9:59 p.m. 3 full hours. Zizou, Olympic torchlighter, Fez, they redeemed themselves.
Oh my god.
Quiet, Riot.
Did you see Ben Habib?
No.
I have been saying for a while Western civilization faces an existential threat. The opening of the Olympics proves my point.
I wondered what extent to which it was the diversity and inclusion of the event, with lots of brilliant LGBT acts or performers sort of being involved in and around it, versus the whole issue of trans inclusion in sport because they want to stoke up that culture war. Or do you think it was a sort of genuine clutching at their pearls when they sat down for what they thought was Friday night family viewing?
There must be some people who were genuinely offended, I guess. There must have been some people who expected something different, I guess. But everyone seems to be zeroing in on stuff that was actually a really tiny part of the ceremony.
Exactly.
I mean, on the one hand, they complained that it was a sort of interminable 4-hour thing. And then everyone is raging about this 2-minute segment in it because they think it was basically making fun of the Last Supper.
Last Supper, yeah.
Not the Last Supper as a concept, but the Last Supper as a fresco painted by a gay atheist who painted himself into the Last Supper as Jesus.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but putting that minor detail
Let's put
aside.
that minor detail.
And the fact that Jesus himself didn't mind hanging out with a sex worker or two, and, sinners were kind of his vibe.
But, okay, let's put all of that aside. I've seen a lot of stuff that goes, to read you an example, this is by far the worst opening ceremony in the history of the Olympics game. It's just gay porn and feminism shit. Disgusting. There's another one by a lady called Rachel who goes, the opening ceremony has many beautiful elements and I'm enjoying it, but the explicit tribute to polyamory is disgusting and obnoxious.
What was that?
I genuinely have no idea. The whole thing was actually very Parisian, specifically not French, but Parisian. Paris is quite chaotic and it is quite sort of all over the place like that.
And it's quite liberal, and it's quite avant-garde, and it is the home of the Moulin Rouge and titillation, and Can is incredibly camp, for God's sake.
There is something there. As you know, I think all this fits into something that is of a piece, yeah? So I think this lashing out at things like polyamory, lashing out at things like trans rights, lashing out at feminism, non-traditional setups, basically, of any kind.
Yep.
I mean, there is, to me, a natural extension to their thinking that is not being articulated, and it's not being articulated for a very specific reason, because it would scare a lot of people at this stage, and they're not ready to scare people in that way quite yet. But there is no way you can be complaining about immigration and about white replacement nonsense and the dilution of the race and all of that, without, on the other side, some sort of cogent plan to make white women baby machines again. Because otherwise, if you're looking at the actual birth rate in the UK, our population is going down, especially if you take out first and second generation immigrant families who contribute hugely to the birth rate. So something in there doesn't make sense to me. You can't say we want to close the doors to any foreigners.
No.
There's something that you're not telling me of that equation. And the thing you're not telling me of that equation is the sort of Miriam Cates angle. Implicitly, white women have a duty to have more white babies.
But are these people pleased then that Kamala Harris, who is not a white woman, has not had children? Or are they angry that she might end up being president of the United States, but because she is not somebody who has had a child, therefore can't actually be a good leader?
Well, I mean, Kamala Harris does have children. She just hasn't given birth to any.
Given birth to them, as has no president of the United States before her. Not a single one of them has given birth.
By definition, they will all have been men. And there were complaints over here, with all the stuff Vance said. Yes, maybe he went too far with his rhetoric, but he does have a point, actually, because all the people in power are sort of childless liberals. And it's like, where? Who?
Yeah.
We've only had one prime minister with no children in the last 100 years, and she was attacked for it by her
Yep.
leadership rival,
Andrew Leadsom, yeah.
Theresa May. That's it. Who are all these childless, joyless people that are in charge of the world?
Prime minister. We recently had one prime minister that doesn't even know how many children he had.
Yes. And so I think that confirms my fear that all this is a little bit attached to some sort of welcome to Gilead
I know.
deal going on.
Well, especially when you combine it with reproductive rights and
exactly all of that
rowing back
stuff.
Women's health access, and it all pieces together into a very worrying culture war march in the direction of, as you say, Gilead. And yesterday in London, Alex, while people were getting upset on Twitter about the opening ceremony of the Olympics, the far right were marching in London. And it's actually, one of the most read articles now on the BBC News website. Now, I hasten to add, the Remain marches, the anti-Brexit marches, even when they had 1 million people in the streets, rarely made it onto the BBC website and mainstream news. But because of the violence associated with a much smaller crowd in the thousands following Tommy Robinson, aka Yaxley Lennon is his real name, terrible violence and lots of racist chanting. There have been attacks on people who were part of the anti-racism demo that were out on the same day. And there was also a trans pride march happening. So I'm sure that the Robinson gang will have chosen that day in part because they will have known what else was happening and wanting to cause trouble. So the rhetoric of these so-called Christians on Twitter and elsewhere, and in our own parliament, as you said, you've mentioned some of them already, like Miriam Cates, is that it feeds through to real violence and real hatred and terrible division within society.
And it's not very Christian. That remains my main point. I'm by no means an expert, but I was raised Christian. I think I understand the very basic concepts involved, and none of them have to do with this intolerance and hatred and anger and obsession and oppression. It seems to me that Christian values are entirely the opposite. So if you want to be good Christians, now is the time to embody those values.
Yeah.
Anyway, circling back to where we started from, I have 2 more blasts from the past. There was another whole series of tweets that were, of course, about how much better the 2012 London opening ceremony was. And a cracking ceremony it was, right? I want to make that clear. I thought it was absolutely terrific. It was just a different kind of theatre, As a theatre person, what you got here were people who are used to traditional theatre suddenly being thrown into what we call a site-specific promenade performance, where you move basically from site to site to see each thing. It's just 2 different kinds of theatre. But even back then, Tory MP Aidan Burley criticised the London Olympic opening ceremony as idiotic, that it was full of lefty multicultural crap. And he said, it's the most lefty opening ceremony I have ever seen, more than Beijing, the capital of a communist state.
I saw that.
Welfare tribute next, bring back Red Arrow's Shakespeare and the Stones. So even then, people thought that was woke. And I have to say that at the time, by the way, I was getting loads of messages from friends and my sisters in Greece going, what's going on now? Why are these people sort of dancing with hospital beds? So there was a lot of the London ceremony that would have been inscrutable to an international audience.
Sure.
And then the last one is a tweet by someone that's harking back to just how marvelous things used to be before. And they say, before the birth of woke agendas and paedophilia, I mean, I don't know how that came in, the opening ceremonies used to mean something. And he has a little video of the Olympic archer, Antonio Rebello, firing an arrow to ignite the Olympic cauldron in Barcelona in 1992. And it's like, do you know what followed that? Montserrat Caballé and Freddie Mercury. So if you think that particular ceremony was free from camp, you need to watch that.
Pageantry is always camp.
You need to watch that video a little bit further.
Church is camp, for Christ's sake. You know, Christianity's been supporting men wearing dresses for thousands of years, for Christ's sake. Like,
oh, Naomi, during Sunday school as well.
The smells and the bells and the singing and the dressing up, it is all incredibly camp. Okay, Alex, I think that's it. I think that's enough for this week's Quiet Riot Sunday School.
We're going to hell. We hope you have not been left too scarred from the blasphemy that you witnessed, both during the opening ceremony and during this podcast.
It's only a matter of time before support groups start popping up. Till then, everybody, hold tight.
And enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye, lovelies. Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreu and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canellu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.